Hello and welcome to the Blessings in the Streets podcast. I am your host, Joseph B. Roberts, and in studio today, I have a phenomenal guest. You are in store for something special here today. This brother I have known, and I say brother not because we're blood related, because we just been connected for that long. We know each other from our college days. So we're talking about over 30 years of being connected with one another. He has a powerful story to share with you. He is the subject of the Emmy Award winning When Claude Got Shot. A very, again, powerful story of redemption, of forgiveness, of just overcoming some phenomenal, just beyond words odds, if you will. The words don't even express what this brother went through, but he's taken some time out of his schedule to share a little bit of that journey with us. So without any further ado, I would like to welcome to the show Mr. Claude Motley. My brother, thank you for being with me today. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you so
Appreciate it.
much, Joe. I really appreciate
Absolutely.
you having
Absolutely, absolutely. And like I said, we go way, way back, and it's always good to know somebody that long and still be in connection with one another. And the only difference is because we don't all live in the same places anymore. We don't get to physically see each other as much, but we still work the social media the best way we know how, and get on
me.
Zoom
That
calls and
pandemic
anything
pulled us
else,
together. That
and pull it
pandemic
together.
pulled us together, didn't it?
Absolutely, it absolutely did. So yeah, so I thank you so much for being on the show today. So before we get started with everything, I do want to give you a few moments to just kind of share with the audience a little bit about yourself. Tell them, where you're from, what you're doing, that kind of thing.
Okay. Like I said, thanks again for having me. Name's Claude Motley. I am from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, born and raised. I live now here down in Charlotte, North Carolina, trying to, escape some of the winters. But I think that pretty soon here I'm going to be trying to escape back to some of those winters as hot as it's been this summer. So, um, like I said, what I do, I went to school with you, obviously. Got into went further along. Now I have my law degree. Also work in business. So just work with my wife. We both have a nonprofit called the Justice Project. We have done a lot of things when it comes down to recently, for the most part, helping immigrants come here from Afghanistan. She has a law firm, Motley Legal. I'm sorry, her move with Motley Legal, that she worked in Afghanistan, started a law firm. I was helping her out for years with that, doing consultancy work and things, and with her. And recently, once the Afghan government fell, we've had a lot of people come over here and we work with the immigration. So that's the most recent thing that I've been doing with her and with the business. I'm also doing some other things that we'll talk about on my side. But that's who I am at this point.
All right, awesome, man. That's just even in that little small soundbite, brother. You're doing some big things, and of course, you got the husband wife legal duo going on and
Uh,
nonprofit. So that's a whole nother layer of excellence to see that going on with you and in your life, and just impacting people both here in the states and abroad. So nice. That's nice to know. Great stuff. All right, my brother. So as with any journey in life that we deal with, as we go through that life journey and all of the bumps and lumps that go along the way, you can't really get to the essence and understanding of a journey unless you go back to the beginning. And so that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to kind of take it back to the beginning. You've shared with the audience that you were born and raised in Milwaukee. So I would like for you to just kind of let our listeners know, what was it like for Claude, a young black man growing up in the city of Milwaukee? Share with us any challenges that you may have faced, as well as any fond memories that you have of what that life was like and how it shaped you into being who you are today. So kind of give, for those who don't know much about Milwaukee, kind of tell them a little bit about what that was like and what it was specifically like for you.
yeah, absolutely. I have a lot of great memories of Milwaukee. Milwaukee's about 90 miles away from your hometown, Chicago. So, Midwest life. But also Milwaukee has some struggles because Milwaukee is probably it is and probably one of the most segregated cities in the nation. Um, but growing up, I'm gonna tell you, it's so different than today's world. The kids growing up today, because one of the main things is that play was a full time job when I was growing up. We wanted to get outside and play. So, we talk about some of the fondest memories. It was just a matter of getting out the house, spending 8, 10 hours out the house and being creative, finding things to do. Finding out with me myself, I found a love for basketball, but I also found, I just found just a plethora of friends. Um, in a city like ours with a grid type system, we talk about things like, a community would change from block to block. And we had a very tight community on my block. You know all the parents and things like that. One of those situations where, you can go over one of your friends' house to eat at any period of time, and they also could give you a whooping if you actually was acting up. That type of community that, you lived in. But also, I also had friends all over the place. And that was one of the things that prepared me, just for life, of being able to, be able to meld into other, situations and other groups and things like that, and learn their systems and stuff like that. And that really helped me out throughout life. But like I said before, just the yearning to be outside and play and be social with other people and learning those atmospheres, helped me out in life, and prepared me. Because one of the things that you don't like about things like that is, and I think we all kind of grew up with a little fear, I'm not going to sit up there and say that fear was healthy, because it allowed you to be on your P's and Q's. It allowed you to always have your head on the swivel. It allowed you to make decisions and under pressure. It definitely was a good thing. But, also, having that fear, especially when you're in a situation where you're in a segregated situation, it makes pressure, because a lot of times, as I was growing up, you start to understand the concepts of poverty and everybody not being on the same level, and that causes some people and some family dynamics to be desperate. It causes a lot of anger and frustration. People brought a lot of their frustrations out from their home into the community and things like that. And and sometimes you was out there by yourself, and you felt that fear, um, and that wasn't always the fondest thing. You know, in a fight, running from a fight, or actually having to vindicate yourself because of things like that. And I know I'm speaking to a certain generation. You know what I'm saying, when we talk about actually throwing hands and things like that. Unfortunately, now, one of the main drivers I have about that fear people have is they pick up guns. And unfortunately, that's been a plague upon us to actually counteract that fear. But with us, we had a different upbringing, but it did serve me well to allow myself to get out of situations and learn how to adjust. So I have a lot of fond memories and a lot of great friends. And one of the things I always say is that Milwaukee is, it's my city, and I feel an obligation to do what I did and talk about the story that I have, and to make sure we talk about the struggles and how we can overcome those struggles because of my upbringing in Milwaukee. So,
Absolutely. And that's great. I mean, the fact that you have since, of course, in your adult life moved away, you're in North Carolina, but you haven't left your city in terms of your connections to it, in terms of ways that you can impact and influence in a positive way. And it is true what you mentioned, back in the day when, people from our age, in generation, when we were growing up, if you had disputes and challenges, even if it led to a fight, you knew that it was just going to be, fist to fist, if you will. It may
right.
last 10 minutes or so. And then after that happens, probably within the next 15 minutes later, you and the person that you just got in a fight with, you back playing again. You back to being
Yep.
boys. And
Yep.
it was done and over with. Whereas now, cities like Milwaukee and Chicago and other inner city type settings, the first response is, somebody can just look at you in a way that you thought was inappropriate. And now, instead of just addressing it, in a logical and just a simplistic type of way, we're too quick to grab a gun, and we're
Yep.
ending lives. And you're seeing it happen. It's with kids at such a young age. So I know you do a great deal of advocating and speaking against that very thing. And again, we're going to talk about that a little bit more in the show. But yeah, it's definitely been a shift as to what you see, and it's kind of impacted how growing up can be. That the days of being outside to play and everything, it's like now you got to be concerned about your kids being outside to play
Yep.
in neighborhoods like that where that used to not be a problem.
Right. Right. Right.
So
And
It's
the thing
just
about it is that when you talk about it, it's permanent. When and there's so many things that's wrapped into the decisions that we've made as a community and as a society that's affected the way that we have to, move around in situations like that. Because the thing about it is that once you lose that, instead of letting that anger off through, you know, and I'm not advocating fighting, of course, but if you didn't have that gun, like you said, there was always redemption. There was always room to come back and even apologize or forgive or even just move on. But, when you grab a gun, it's permanent. And the bad thing about it is that those feelings of loss is also permanent. And so it becomes a cycle. It begins to feed on itself. So, I know we're talking about our upbringing and things like that, so I don't really want to go. But the thing about it is that, like you said, some of my best friends, some of the people that have always been around me, best believe we took a tumble to ourselves, and we got at each other. But that kind of show, and when you can come back, it almost strengthens the bonds that you have
hmm
with those people. You know what I'm saying? And when you have bonds that strengthen in those one-on-one situations, it strengthens the bonds within the community and society. That even if we get mad, we still care about people. We understand how that can be. We don't. I don't think. I think we've lost that. You
right.
know.
And you spoke to that a little bit earlier about not only at the friendship level, but just being able to go over other people's houses
Right.
and parents assuming the role of parent to you just because they knew you or they knew your own mom or dad or what have you. And it was just the whole community effect. You could
Yeah.
get disciplined by somebody else's parent because they were taking responsibility for you as being one of their own, even if there was no blood connection.
Right.
So we've lost a lot of that in our respective communities. So yeah,
Yeah.
definitely a shift in what it was like back in the day versus what it is like now in that regard. So
Yeah. Yeah.
absolutely. And so for your home life, how many siblings do you have? It's not just you. You have how many
I
siblings do
got
you
four
have?
sisters. I got
Okay.
four sisters. Yeah, and I'm the youngest, so that makes me an anomaly in some ways. In which I got four mamas, five mamas, I should say. And I grew up a baby, so that's why I say I was out alone because I was the only boy out there for my
hmm
family. So I had to kind of pave my own little path in that situation. Wasn't doing double
Right.
dutch in front of the house. I was out.
So it's almost like a dual effect because you got sisters that, of course, looking out for you because you're the baby brother. But then, of
Absolutely.
course, as you grew up, I'm sure you've played the reverse role of, hey, that's my sister. And you're checking
Oh,
out whoever they're connecting with male wise or whatever, making sure, hey, that's my sister, making sure that they're being treated right, dealt with appropriately, and pretty much ready to go at it if you need to in defense of your sister because of the bond that you have.
all my brother-in-laws got my certification of approval. I can tell you that.
All right. There you go. There you go. That's right. That's right. That's how it's supposed to be, man. So
Exactly.
again, thank you for giving us a little backdrop about, growing up. So as
One more thing
I'm sorry, go
one more
ahead.
thing I do really want. I want to say something. And this is more about like I said, we're talking about growing up, and I did grow up in the church. And I want to go on and talk about real quick about my upbringing because it wasn't traditional, but it was religious.
hmm
I grew up a Jehovah's Witness, as my father was a Jehovah's Witness, and my mother was a Seventh Day Adventist. So that was a definite part of my not only of my spiritual path, but also my identification of who I was as a person. And so I think that ability to stand up because obviously one, if not two, of those things are very different in the black community, as in religious picking, people have taken up. But also, it made me very identifiable because I really wasn't out on the seventh, on the Saturdays too much because my mother was at 7 Day Adventist. She went to church on Saturday, and then I turn around and go to church on Sunday with my father. So my weekends used to be tied up, and I used to be out knocking on their doors and things like that. So I was very identifiable who I was, but everybody also knew me for who I was in the neighborhood as in playing ball, being friendly, and everything like that. So I myself, like I said, it was a definite path that I took. But I can tell you right now, a lot of people. I was just blessed. I was blessed throughout my whole time as a kid.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I'm glad you shared that. And I can only imagine that had to be a bit, not only just time consuming, but having two parents of two different, belief systems. and I don't know, was that a struggle for you with, trying to figure out which one am I leaning on, or did you just end up just taking it all in and just getting out of it what you could get out of it? So, I mean, I don't know how that was for you to, like, okay, I'm a
Let me
Jehovah
tell you,
today, I'm a 7 Day Adventist tomorrow, I'm a, I don't-
let me tell you, man, I did go to law school for a reason because there was pretty arguments going on in the house. But the thing about it was, at one point in time, once you get past the disagreements and the thoughts on ideology, you know, both my parents loved God, and they loved us for different, and different. They had different ideas of how we were going to be raised and everything. That could be definitely caused a conflict. But in the end of the day, they got 5 children that are great people, and that's because the foundation was strong. You know what I'm trying to say?
Mhm.
Sometimes the house shook, but the foundation was strong. So
And that's good. So I think that's important for you to mention, because while it may be ideal to have everybody in the same religious, identification in terms of we're all this or we're all that,
right,
at
right.
the end of the day, believers of God, whether or not you may have slight bits of interpretations here or there, we should all still be able to communicate, to thrive in one another's settings, and again, exchange ideas about how we might see a particular, perspective on something versus the other. It doesn't mean that we have to be enemies. It doesn't mean that we have to
Right.
refuse to talk to one another. It's just we just see something a little bit different, and I think you have more communications with that. You're less likely to have that separation, if you will, between church systems and ideologies, because, oh, well, I can't talk to you because you're this, or I can't associate with you because you're that. No, if you're all pursuing the same goal, but which is to glorify God and to acknowledge who He is and what He means in our lives, but you have some certain ideological differences. Okay, well, let's talk about that. Let's kind of see what you're seeing. Let's see what I'm seeing, and perhaps maybe we can find what the ultimate message that we're supposed to glean from that, and we can learn from both, learn from one another. So I think that's critical that you mentioned that. And of course, knowing that you, of course, are in the field of law, because that is funny. You said, hey, we've had enough arguments. I went into law for a reason. I do want to ask you real quick. When did you know that was a path that you actually wanted to take, and what was it about law that attracted you to that field?
you know, and that's one of the things that we try to instill in our kids about trying to find a path. And find the thing. The thing about it is, I went to law very late in life. I had actually uh, got my bachelor's and got my master's in finance before I actually decided to go to law school. One of the reasons why I went to law school was because of the capacity of the law firm that my wife had actually brought. And when she went to build her law firm, I went to law school just so that we could just kind of work together and start doing things, within the field together. But one of the, even when I was doing business, I always thought about uplifting my people,
Hmm.
because both legally and financially is one of the weaknesses that we have often find within the people that I grew up with, people in my family, people, everything. They truly, need that help and that support in those both of those fields. So I can tell you one thing: it was just pretty much lending my mind to those fields more than me saying that's what I really wanted to, because I
Gotcha.
really my thought process is really about how can I help others.
Makes total sense to me. I get that. And again, and even if and I think for anybody who's listening to this, just understanding, hey, in your story, hey, I chose this path later in life. So that
Yeah,
just is a testament that it's never too late to shift gears, to identify where you want to go. What's important is that, are you making moves in such a way where you're at least actually actively trying to find out, where do I fit? What's my calling? Where am I supposed to be best utilized
yeah,
to impact and change the world? So it doesn't have to be by a specific date, a specific time, because so oftentimes we limit our opportunities to be blessed, because we're putting it on a clock. We're saying, oh,
yeah,
if I don't do this by such and such a date, then that means I'm done, I'm over with. Or because this particular situation happened, that might have been a hiccup in the road or whatever, that means that I'm done. No, it doesn't mean. It just means that this is a part of the journey. This is a part of the learning curve. Let's take that, leverage it. Let's flip it around and see what we can do to catapult ourselves to where it is exactly that we're supposed to be most effectively utilized in. So that's good
yeah,
stuff, man. That's good stuff. So, of course, at the top of the show, I made mention that, you are the subject of the Emmy Award winning When Claude Got Shot. And what I want people to understand is that when I say that this brother is a part of the Emmy Award winning show, the documentary, I should say, of When Claude Got Shot, he didn't play the role of Claude. He is Claude. This
Right.
documentary is about him. It's a documentary that tells a story specifically about a very challenging, difficult time in his life. Probably, and I'll let you be the one to say that, probably one of the most, if not the most difficult challenge that you've ever faced in life. And so at this time, I would love for you to just, and again, thanks in advance for your transparency and just your willingness to revisit this, because you've had to tell this story, I know, thousands of times. And it can never be easy to tell just because of the nature of it. But nevertheless, if you would take us back to that day where this whole story begins, the whole subject matter of When Claude Got Shot. Take us through that, what that experience was like, and what you had to do to just work your way through it all. So I'm going to turn that over to you, because this is a powerful story. And if you haven't had a chance to see this documentary, I promise you, you need to check it out immediately. It definitely touches a number of different subject matters, and it makes you really think about life and decisions that are made, paths that we're following, and just even just the whole state of our future. And speaking of our young people. So with that said, man, I'm gonna turn that over to you. Tell us about that experience for yourself.
Okay. You know, I'm gonna tell you the story first, and just kind of give you a little bit of thought processes on it. In 2014, I went back to my hometown, Milwaukee, for a class reunion. It was our 25th class reunion, and I was in the whole process of getting together. We had a pre get together, and we met at a bar, and I got a lot of people that was coming from out of town. We got a chance to see each other and things like that. And I was with one of my good friends, Scott Cross, who I went to high school with, and we got together. And I picked them up, and so I was dropping them back off at home after that because we were going to go play golf the next day. So I dropped them off, and I was sitting in. You know how you sitting outside the house just to make sure the person gets in, especially when you're talking about 1 o'clock, 1:30 at night. Um, so I'm waiting, but I'm getting a lot of texts now, people that I've seen. So I'm sitting there emailing, texting people and things like that, and I kind of lose track if he got in, which was, I don't know, that wasn't pretty much, I wasn't really doing my part at that point in time, but I was a little distracted. So, but at that, and being distracted, a couple cars came up on the side. One car came out in front of me, and because I was right by the corner, um, and it kind of angled out in front of me, and another car came on the side. And at that point in time, some of my spider senses were starting to tingle because when I looked over, the people in the car, was three people in the car next to me. They were looking at me, so I kind of knew something was going on. So I put my phone down, and maybe I shouldn't have did that, but put my phone down. I put the car in drive because I was going to. I saw a little gap that I was going to speed through because I knew something was up. And as soon as I put that car in drive, a kid had jumped out, a 15-year-old boy jumped out and tried to carjack me. I punched the gas and he shot into the car, and the bullet actually hit me through and shot through my jaw. Um, I got away though. That gap was there, and I hit the gap, and I got away. I drove myself to the hospital, um, and went through the whole process of going, getting medical attention. But come to find out, this young man, his name was Nathan. They kept that group of boys. There was about 9 of them. They kept on carjacking the next night, and the young man that shot me got shot the next night in another carjacking, trying to carjack a young lady named Victoria. She had a concealed weapon, and she shot him. And both of us ended up being in the same hospital compound at the same exact time. Um, he confessed to shooting me, and we went through. And the movie is really showing us through the journey about 2 weeks after I got shot and identifying who it was that shot me, all the way through about another 5 years. And so we go through the justice system. We go through the heartache of what I call the criminal justice system when it comes down to actually dealing with us and our processes, and a lot of the heartaches and things that go on when you go into such a tragic event. Um, it has ripple effects. When I said that we're one of the most segregated cities in the town. When you talk about that, you're talking about a close proximity of people. So when you have something like that that happens as tragedy, we do it almost every day. Unfortunately, it has a ripple. The trauma has a ripple effect throughout the community. And this kind of shows some of the things that we go through. When you ask me about my upbringing and things like that, I tell people all the time that unfortunately, because some of the heartaches that I've gone through, it kind of equipped me with not only the grit to actually get through a situation, but also some of the love to actually try to push me and the security of friendships and relationships to actually bolster me to put me in a position that I'm in today to talk about it, with you. But yeah, so that was a horrible situation. Um, had 10 to 12 different surgeries, depending on how you look at it, and the bills and everything that comes with it is catastrophic. The young man was paralyzed from the waist down when he got shot, and he actually got sentenced to 12 and a half years in prison. And then the lady that shot him was a nurse. So everybody in this whole situation was just catastrophically affected by it. But also, I'm trying to do things today just to make something good come out of that. But I definitely would suggest anybody who has an understanding of the gun violence and how it affects society look at this movie. It's a very eye opening, revealing movie, very very heartfelt.
Absolutely. And like I said, I've had the personal pleasure of watching it when it first came out, and it's every bit of that and then some. Very well put together. You really the way that it was set up in a way that it drew you in, like as if you were there to experience
Yeah,
what that was like. And just to recap, for those who are listening in on this, is again, we had this 15-year-old young man, he tries to carjack you. He shoots in the car in the midst of you trying to escape, basically to save your life. Because, like you said, your street senses, as you said, your spider senses kicked in. It was like, okay, something about to pop off. Let me get up out of here before it does.
right,
He
right,
shoots in, not even really knowing if he shot you or not at that moment. He just know he shot in the car.
yeah,
Then the very next night, he and his same friends attempt to carjack again. This time, he comes across somebody who happens to have a concealed weapon, and before he gets a chance to get to them, they get to him in defense.
yeah,
Which is why this wasn't some just random thing. And
right,
unfortunately, he not only gets shot, but he's now permanently paralyzed for life below the waist,
yeah,
and serving time in prison as a result. And just for the fact that the two of you being able to be connected, you and the woman who got shot, or who were part of the carjacking attempts, for you all to get connected and realize, hey, we are a victim of the same person.
yeah,
I say how ironic that is, but then at the same time I say maybe not so much, because I think it was meant for the two of you to make that connection, so that all other future events, the documentary and other things that have come about as a result of this, even though it's a tragic event, it was an event that needed to happen, unfortunately, to bring more conversation and awareness to the ongoing plagues of gun violence. So I know in this journey of the whole legal proceedings and things like that, and again, this is captured in the documentary, but at some point, you know, here you were going through these court proceedings, and I know he ultimately got 12 and a half years, but he was actually slated to potentially get more time than that,
yeah,
if
yeah.
I'm recalling correctly.
20 years. Yeah,
But there is a point that is captured in the documentary. There's a point where you kind of had a change of heart as to how you felt that the criminal justice system should pursue him.
right.
Kind of take us through that. What were you feeling at first?
Yeah.
And then what was that turning point that made you say, you know what, I'm kind of having second thoughts on this? Kind of explain to the audience, kind of walk them through what I'm speaking to on that for you.
Oh, absolutely. The thing about it is that like I said before, when we talk about the going into the risk that we see so many of our people give out, is one of the biggest risks is availing themselves to the criminal justice system that truly doesn't really have the best interest in mind in a lot of ways. Not only the perpetrators, but the victims, survivors, and the community as a whole. Except for throwing people in prison and throwing away the key. Sometimes it feels that way. Um, this young man was 15 when he shot me, so that means that availed him to the children's court criminal justice system. And at the time, he was only looking at they can only hold you till you're 21. So at the time when they were talking to him, he was only going to get 5 years. And since he was paralyzed, and the system he was going to had no ability to handle someone that's in that type of medical condition, he was going to do all his time at his house. So for me to be shot and going through the things that I went through, I was very frustrated with the system. And then also I'm gonna tell you one thing that it's not really shown in the film, but one of the biggest things that really made me mad is that when we start doing our research on who this kid was and who he hung out with, going to his Facebook page, come to find out that the DA and the police, they knew all of these boys and what they were doing for the last few weeks of carjacking people and things like that. So it was just like, you know, I came into a city to celebrate, and I was like, when I came in, I was a potential victim before I even put step in Milwaukee, and didn't know it. So anyway, that's a whole nother subject matter. But so the thing about it is that I knew that he had this 5 years that he was looking at, and unfortunately, the young man was still in the mindset of still, putting himself at risk, and he went AWOL twice, which is fascinating within itself because he was in a wheelchair, but he, left his house a couple of times, and so we pushed for him to go into adult court to be tried as an adult, and at that point in time, you kind of realize, not only he's going into a whole nother system that is very unforgiving, and it can cause a lot of dead ends for people. But also, within myself, you know, you go through these journeys, and at this point in time, we're talking about 2 or 3 years later. It's about that. When we talk about the fear, I was talking about the fear earlier growing up, but fear and safety, safe and security, they're like yin and yang. They work together. As in, it pushes you, but it also can break you down. And I felt a lot more safe and secure in myself of who I was, and learning a lot more about the situation, learning about how the situation does affect our community. And I told you already that I'm really, my whole thing is really about helping others, and doing some of the foundations of where I grew up with the godliness and things like that. And I truly was like, you know what, this young man, I'm going to be okay. But this young man is about to probably have just as many trials and tribulations as I am when it comes down to being a paraplegic in a prison system at the age of 16. And if I try to put myself in his shoes, because we've all made mistakes, we all was young and dumb, and we all done things that we regret later on. And if I could put myself in his shoes, I knew that, regardless to what I did, this is a scary thing to actually face him down. So I asked for those 5 years he was going to get in juvenile. I asked for those 5 years to be in prison, and for him to actually, do his 5 years, and not throw away the key and not throw away his life, because I'm okay. I'm going to go forward and move forward. And just like we were talking about fighting and forgiving, this is just another fight I had to deal with. But, the judge thought he should get 12 years, and so that's where we're at.
Gotcha. And again, man, that just speaks volumes to the integrity and character of a man that you are. Because truth be told, that's not an easy thing for. I don't care who it is. Everybody's not going to respond like that. I mean, you tried to carjack me. You shot me in my jaw. I mean, this was potentially life threatening for you. This wasn't just a graze or anything like that.
Right.
And like you
Right.
said, all of the other things that trickled down from, this incident, and for you to come to a point in the process where you like showing compassion and forgiveness, it kind of replicated what you just said about our discussion earlier about how it used to be when we were kids. We get into a
Right.
fight, we get into a little scuffle, and then, 10, 15 minutes later, we were boys again. We was good, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and so for you to think enough of that young man's life, and to say to yourself, hey, I'm gonna be all right, but he might not be. He's got the now his newfound health challenge being a paraplegic, but then also just the prison system. We don't know what that's going to be like for that young man. Does he get taken advantage of because he can't do, certain things. Does he get manipulated? And the fact that in the documentary, I know that you mentioned in there that this young man was actually pretty intelligent. He was like a smart kid. So it's kind of it it's ironic and also kind of unfortunate that he was even caught up
Yeah.
in that life, because this is a smart young man who should have been excelling in school and getting his diploma and being in somebody's college and just
Right.
doing great things, and yet somehow he got distracted. Somehow he lost his way and found himself out here in criminal like situations, and ultimately in situations where he almost took a life of someone. So but for you to have that heart of forgiveness, man, I mean, that speaks volumes. And again, for anybody who has an opportunity to be a part of listening to our show today, remember that the forgiveness is everything. And forgiveness, of course, it's for you. I mean,
Right.
that forgiveness has helped your healing process.
Absolutely.
And again, it's given that young man a new hope, a new chance on life, even though he's dealing with his prison time. It's not a forever thing. That doesn't mean that it has to be the ending of his story. He has an
Right.
opportunity to be redeemed and do great works, even in that wheelchair, and perhaps maybe one day be on a platform and on a stage where he tells the story of what he did, but how, because someone thought enough of him, that thought his life was valuable and worthy, that he was given a second chance to redeem and perhaps to do some great things. So I look forward to what that young man, I'm sure as you are, what he might actually contribute to society once his time is served, because you've given him that platform to be able to do that. And truth is everybody wouldn't have done that. So that speaks that speaks volumes to you. So with that said, I want to kind of delve in a little bit more to that healing process. You know, what has the healing process been like for you? I know, of course, there's the physical portion of it, but I'm also interested emotionally, mentally, spiritually. How do you bounce back from something like that? In all of those facets, and so in other words, what's worked for you to just kind of say, you know what, because you said earlier, I know I'm gonna be okay. So there's got to be a reason why you're gonna be okay, and so tell us about that healing journey for you and all those spectrums of it all, emotionally, physically, mentally, spiritually. How have you been doing it to just kind of, again, let me hit the reset button after this. Yeah, I wasn't
Right.
expecting this to be a part of the journey, but it was. What's been working for you? What's been your process?
You know, one of the things that when we talk about healing is everybody has a different path into it. And when I talk about my path or how I went about when I talk about this, it's not everybody's path. I do. You know, I could have gone into the whole forgiveness process a lot earlier, and I could never got there. Who knows within that spectrum of where a person's going to land? But the thing about it is that I think one of the things, and let me just redirect a little bit. One of the things since I've been going in this, we talked about, me being shot. So I deal with a lot with understanding of what gun violence contributes. And one of the things that we got to understand is we talk about gangs and street violence, and we get so wrapped up in that thought process because that's the most, salacious thought process of gun violence. But the biggest thing, the biggest process or the biggest part of gun violence is suicide. You know, that's the majority of where people use guns to kill, and a lot of that's because a lot of people, and this is just my own thought process, but a lot of people we live in today's society, we live on anger, we live on off of frustration and that tenseness, and oftentimes when you realize that it's empty, those are empty calories, those are things that you can't survive on, and it's just like being hooked on a drug. Once that's gone, once you realize nobody cares how mad you are, there's an emptiness behind it. There's a hole that's there, and oftentimes people don't come back from that emptiness that they find behind all that fuel that they were using as anger. And I realized that kind of early on in my process, that I wasn't just going to sit here and just be angry because of all the things that happened to me. I knew that the young man shot with me, like I said before, trying to understand why. Trying to understand why that happened. I realized that oftentimes, we like you just said, this young man had a future in front of him. Why did he go down this path? But oftentimes we find out in situations, especially in the inner city, there's way more paths to go down the wrong path than it is to go down the right path. You got to search for that path. And not everybody's going to make it. And I have plenty of friends throughout life that didn't make it, that I enjoyed immensely. And I still have a lot of love for those people. But yet and still, they passed away or are in prison. And these were even I felt at the time good people. So, I understand not finding that path within yourself. And so that's one of the things that when we talk about healing, I think that I really wanted to give up that anger. I really wanted to give up that anger. And then once again, I said I'm going to be all right because from the moment I was shot, that I was sitting in the bed after my first surgery, right after it happened. Everybody from my unit came to my hospital bed, so I got a whole room with a big old hug for my high school family. But with you all, my college homeboys. Once you go on, and my family, everybody was very supportive and understanding and gave me felt that hole up where that anger was, and I can go away from it. I had something there, and that was caring, that was love, and that was support. And that's what allowed me to go ahead and change my thought process and allow me to think different. And once again, you know, I'm here talking to you today. I was already blessed. How would I be not to pass that blessing on? How would I feel if I was really want to be like, hey, listen, that man could have any way could have went. I could have lost a life to be able to not be able to talk today. Could have ripped my tongue apart. You know, God was looking after me, even though He put me through that situation. God was still looking at me and giving me a blessing. So I definitely wasn't going to hold that blessing just to myself. I really want to try to bless somebody for going forward. So that's my whole part of my healing process when it comes down to setting my goals, setting what I want to do with this, and just using it as a platform to say, hey, listen, there's a I can try to put down a path, try to find this path, and just try to find what I'm trying to do and see if it works for you.
Absolutely, man. I love that. And and I caught very early on as you started to discuss this. You said, I just refuse to just let myself stay angry. You basically said, I'm just not going to stay stuck in this. Yeah, it's unfortunate. It's beyond unfortunate. I wouldn't have wanted to go through it. I don't think anybody would have wanted to trade places with you on that. But you still, even in the midst of something as intensely challenging as this was, the fact that you said, you know what, I'm still not going to stay stuck here. God has graced me to still be here. I'm still able to recover. I'm still in a position to do some of the many of the things that I had always planned on doing. This is just it's just a bump in the road. It's a big bump, but it's a bump in the road. And I'm refusing to stay stuck. And I think that's the important message for people to understand about what it means to go through adversity is that, yeah, we're going to all go through our challenges and our adversities of life. It's how do you respond? Do you say, I'm going to just stay stuck here? Am I going to seek permanent solutions to temporary problems like suicide offers? Am I just going to go into this depressive mode, where I just, woe is me, and just let that be my new existence? Or am I going to say, you know what? I don't understand why this happened. I don't understand why I had to be a part of it. But clearly, if I went through it and I'm still here to talk about it, there must be something that's supposed to be birthed from this.
Yeah.
And with that said, I wanted just real quick, I wanted to know, would you say that the documentary itself was a part of your healing process? Because I'm curious to know, like, at what point did you make the connection between this happened to me to, hey, let's make a documentary about it? And I'm sure you didn't know at that time that it would ultimately become a Emmy Award winning documentary. I mean, you're the first and only person I've ever met that's an Emmy Award winner, and I'm proud to be able to say that. Hey, I know you. I can brag. Hey, I know somebody that's an Emmy Award winner. I mean, but just how did that even come about? And was that a part of your healing process to even create the storyline to even tell that to people in such a format? Kind of tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, the thing about I mean, the moon, the sun, and everything lined up for the documentary. And I'm gonna tell you, there's a couple of things because that's kind of odd in that situation. Number one, I was with one of my good friends who actually directed and produced the film. His name is Brad Lichtenstein, and we've been friends for over 20 some years. His son, and my son went to the same daycare, and that's where we met. Um, I lost your picture. You still there, Joe?
I'm still there. Keep going.
Okay, okay.
Yep.
All right. So you got to edit that out. So I'll just go back. So I was with my good friend Brad Lichtenstein, and his son, and my son actually we met because they both went to the same daycare. And so every time I came back to Milwaukee, we would stay at his house. And, we kind of spread out. I'll be over cousins and sisters and all those houses, and we were always spread out. But one of the houses we would stay at, and actually my son was with him at the time. We stayed over his house. So when I recovered in some parts in the film, you would see me. I'm at his house. So he was a documentarian, and so that's one aspect of it. The second aspect is that my wife also has a documentary because of her work that she had in Afghanistan. And they were just finished filming at the time when I got shot. So they were finishing up their documentary with my wife. So one of the aspects of where we were actually sitting down with a police officer, um, that was her part of her documentary. So you're talking about a situation that kind of just was like lending to pushing me in a certain direction. As we sat down and we were just kind of talking about everything and how shocked and everything was, we were like, why don't we go through this process? And I can tell you right now, when you talk about the healing process of making the film, it definitely when you're discussing the what you want to talk about, when you're in those situations and you're having deeper thoughts where you have to express yourself, you're not just feeling it, but you actually have to go ahead and regurgitate it out and talk it through. It definitely was part of the healing system for me, but also you see the transformation through my thought process as I had to talk it through because I had to
Mm-hmm.
actually think about those things and not just emotionally, just emotionally just experience them,
Mm-hmm.
So
And that's powerful because again, when you watch a documentary like this, I mean, much of what you're doing is like live. It's not like I read this script and I memorized the lines. Like you're in the actual moment and feeling, and there's even a couple of points where you had to turn the camera off for a moment.
oh
Like
yeah, oh
I'm in a
yeah,
moment, not because we're editing or like this is okay. I need a moment because
yeah, nah,
we're and that's what I think made the documentary so powerful because it wasn't a scripted out type of event.
right,
We're feeling this with you as you're going through it, even though the event itself happened 9 years ago.
right,
Because it was being recorded all that throughout that time frame, we're getting live and in person emotions and everything. So we're really getting to connect with you as the real life character in this story, as well as family and friends and everybody else who's a part of this experience.
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah,
that's what made it so powerful. I'm just like, man, this is huge. I mean, I've watched documentaries before, but this
right,
was different, man. This was different in a
yeah,
good way, in a good
right,
way. So,
right, right,
so yeah, that's great, man. So, of course, in the documentary, you this is a part of it.
hmm
You had an opportunity to speak to the young man who shot you.
right.
What I'm curious to know is what was the words of wisdom or encouragement or what have you that you shared with this man when you had a chance to sit in front of him. What was kind of that dialogue like? What did you say to him? And what has been your message in general as you've had an opportunity to speak to other, again, young people, community leaders, things of that nature? What has that process, been like in terms of the messaging that you're sending out to them as far as from what you've experienced and what you feel like needs to happen moving forward? What has been that message from you?
You know, the message is definitely just like me has kept evolving. The more you know about it. Let me start off with the meeting that I did get a chance to sit down with that young man because in my thought process and because that meeting with him was just as much as for me to get the why and the understanding as it was for him. And I'm going to explain that. You know, one of the things that I'm delving myself in is restorative justice, and what this was called it was a victim. They changed the name a little bit, but it was, victim perpetrator mediation. And we got a chance to sit and kind of talk about it. Um, and my thought process was I really wanted him to understand that he was about to go through a lot. He had been in for a couple of years at that time, and he still had a lot of years to go. And I knew he was going to go through a lot. And one of the things I really want to express to him is that I have today, you know, that in my heart, I'm not holding any grudges. We all make mistakes, and he apologized in the hearings and things like that. And I just want to tell him that I heard him. I know that he has, regrets, as in the price that he had to pay. And I didn't really want him to carry that along, thinking that he also owed me something and owed me. He already apologized. He's about to pay his debt to society. And so I just really wanted to let him know that, you know, he can move past this without looking over his back, thinking about me, and he can become who he needs to be. Because in all honesty, that's what I was doing. I was really like saying, hey, listen, I'm going and moving forward. And I just really wanted him to also be in that same thought process and let go of that anger or whatever it caused him to be in that situation, regret, guilt, whatever. Let that go when it comes down to me. So that was very healing, because when you talk about the forgiveness process, it is a concept of it's also a declaration of your own self saying, I'm giving that up and I'm letting that go, and that's when you start to get to a real forgiveness thing. When you talk about what advice I give, um, it's always it's moving, because one of the things that we know about gun violence is never really about the gun. It's about all the situations and components that go into those moments, and like I said before, if you having problems at home, if you're having problems with your own safety, your security, as in, I'm not just talking about as in feeling safe, but you're talking about where you're going to get your next food, where you're going to sleep that night. When you talk about that type of security, or unfulfilledness in your life, you're going to bring those frustrations, and oftentimes it all comes down to that finger that's pulling that trigger. That's where all that frustration, derives to. So what I talk to people about, and these young kids, is about speaking and making sure that you get those things out and talk to someone. Make sure you actually are looking at these frustrations and angers and considering everything that's involved in it. Not only what you're doing right now, how that's going to affect you, from your past, or how it's affecting your thought process, with the situation that you're in, but also the risks to where you want to go in the future. And consider all those things when you're dealing with knowing that you're looking at that gun that's sitting there and what that actually means. Because I always say that that gun, there is no recourse from that. There is no coming back, from what you do with that gun. You might be able to move forward as in let it go, but it doesn't. It's no unrewinding when you take a life or you maim somebody with that gun. That's always going to be there. That's going to be a scar. So, I talk to people about that, but also, going forward, I'm also talking about policymakers as us as a society of how we want to start dealing with these situations so we can relieve that pressure before anybody picks up a gun. We're talking about gun control and things like that, but the thing about it is there's more guns in this country than people. Can't walk away from it. It's too late. So we have to deal with the situation that we're in today. And a lot of that is dealing with people and dealing with their mindsets before they can pick up a gun. So that's what, and that's what I really are trying to get to people to understand, give them options, let them put their goals out there, and see, does me having a gun actually get me to those goals? Give people back hope, thinking about their hope. And that's what we talk about when we talk about religion. You know, and I'm sorry, I'm going to go a little long with this one, but when we talk about, when you were just saying about religion and us, different religions getting together and being able to actually coexist and understand each other. You know, that's one of the things. I'm not a real big religious person because of, understand the concept of religion. And what I've always thought is the 20,000 foot view of it is when it's there to make you a better person. It's there to actually guide you to be better. And that's what I always say. Hey, listen, if it's a religious thing, if it's a hope that you're going to get a hold on, make sure that it's about love, it's sure, but it's about caring for someone just like you would care for yourself. And it's about that process. So mental health, your physical health, your religious health, I think it's all concept of when we talk about advice to actually get to the healing and making it better people.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I love how you broke that down where you said, hey, it's the situation about the gun comes well before the gun. We need to quit making it just be about there's something that led up to it. And again, it's not to say that just because I come from a broken home or just because we don't have, a lot of money to work with or whatever, that gives me a right to shoot at somebody. We're not saying it in the sense of that it justified what I did, but it does explain the frustrations, the challenges. So what are we doing as a society in regards to those things? How are we helping to come alongside people in that regard so that they don't get to, again, the permanent solutions, for temporary problems?
Yeah,
If you just hungry, let's see how we can get you connected with some food before you let your frustrations out and shooting somebody because you tried to steal some food and you felt like
hmm
this was the way to do it. Or if I'm having some traumatic events that I haven't recovered from, whether it's somebody who's been, maybe molested or abused or something like that. Let's see if we can, from a mental health perspective, let's see if we can get you connected with someone who can help you process that so you
right.
don't feel like you got to take your own life or take the life of someone else by use of that gun. So, basically it's kind of like let's get behind the issue. Let's get behind it all so we can minimize the likelihood of these tragic events taking place and taking the lives, not only physically taking lives, but taking lives from people who, as a result of the haphazard behaviors, they're now sitting behind prison bars, in some instances for life and not being able to do anything, being separated from their families, being separated just from society in general. So I think that's very important, and I love that you're doing that kind of work to bring the attention to that. And so, with that said, that brings us to the part of our show before we close out. Is I want to celebrate you, brother. I mean, I've been celebrating you all along, and I'm gonna continue to do that. But I want to celebrate you in the
Yes.
sense of what do you have going on? Is there any particular, again, projects that you're working on right now? Anything upcoming? I don't know. Any new documentaries coming up? Any books? Anything you got going on that you would like to share with our audience? Please do. Let us know what you got going on, and if there's ways for people to support what you're doing, share that as well.
Well, right now, in the last year, I've opened up or created the Forgiveness Project. One of the things that is a nonprofit, what we're doing is number one, having these speaking events, having meaningful conversations, and putting, actually, and also getting screenings for my film. But one of the things that we found that is the most powerful thing is instead of leaving people with all those emotions, of letting people to talk about their situations and to talk about the situations on a whole, how they felt about the film, to be brief. And we've been really working with the League, which is a social impact organization, and we're looking to move into start working with Picture Motion. Hopefully, we can raise some funds so that we can actually work with them. Um, so we can actually continue on the work of our impact campaign with the film. Um, got some other things in the works, but a lot of these things are impacted by the strike that's going on. But hopefully those things will come abreast soon. I'll have words and get out to you. Um, and I really, since everything has been happening, I've really been thinking about writing a book, but that's also down the road. I gotta get some thought processes on that, how to get into it. So that's the Forgiveness Project, and that's our impact campaign with when Claude got shot. And when I say the Forgiveness Project, what we're doing is now I'm talking about the meaningful conversations and the movie screenings, but we want to start to work moving into lobbying to get some of those solutions from the community and working those into a situation where we can work with national organizations like Every Town for Gun Safety and with Brady and things like that. So we can start influencing lobbying, and not from a point of view of just looking at gun reform, but also start to have common sense lobbying for structures that actually help people not to pick up the gun. That's what our thought process is going. And then the healing process. I'm really into restorative justice practices. Start working with younger people, get into circles and talking about some of their frustrations and things that they're going through, and being heard. Obviously one of the things that I went through is being told the path that I needed to go through, and nobody was really listening. And I do understand there is a need to listen to these kids because they're going through things that we never went through. We never had the social media and the processes of a million people actually, having an opinion on how I live my life and things like that. But these kids are, open to a lot more things than we have been. So, we really want to go in and start to really dealing with these kids on the basis of that. So that's what we're doing with the Forgiveness Project. So I'm gonna continue on doing work with my wife with her nonprofit, and we just really are looking forward to what the future holds.
That is awesome, man. That's awesome work. And I know you didn't mention this, but I know you had recently in the city of Milwaukee they did a big mural in regards to your experience when Claude got shot. What was that like to just like to say, I mean, your whole again that what started out as a traumatic event is being not so much exploited, but it's being celebrated in terms of what's come out of it.
Yeah,
And so
yeah.
what was that experience like, real quick, about just seeing this mural on your behalf in your city, acknowledging who you are and the work that you're doing? I'm sure that had to be an exciting experience, to say the
It,
least.
it it definitely is. The thing about it is that unfortunately, when you grow up, you always think of mirrors of somebody who passed away. And now I drive past it, and my big old face jumps in my car. It kind of shocks me sometimes, it's it's a great thought process. I don't think of it as myself. I just think of it as what somebody can when those kids see that and they'll ask their parents or ask anybody who is that. My story can actually talk to them and say, hey, when one of the things I even through this process, I really wanted to say that I could relate to Nathan, the kid that shot me. And I can relate to his story, and I want people to relate to my story just the same way. As in, listen, it's not just about anger and frustration, but I care for the people here in Milwaukee, just like I care for the people in any city that's going through the frustrations and struggles that we're having when it comes down to the things that have been thrown upon us when it comes down to guns and how we have to deal with that situation. So, yeah, no, having a mural, it's a little humbling, it
Hmm.
truly is. It truly is. But I'm so happy that it was done. I'm so happy like I said, the love that I'm getting from Milwaukee, and I'm just hoping that I can pass that forward.
Awesome. And if anybody's interested in somehow contributing or connecting to the Healing Project, what would be the best way for them to find out more information about doing that?
Yeah, it's the Forgiveness Project. Right now we're like I said, I'm just in the process, but now honestly, my website will be up. It's going to be theforgivenessproject.org. You'll be able to find ways to actually donate on there if you have any blessings that you would love to give to me. Regardless regardless to how much love I got, sometimes I need some help too. So I'm not I'm not above that. Telling y'all that, but any way that you can help with that, but also, so we'll have the website, theforgivenessproject.org, and also you can go to when Claude Got Shot.com or .org on both of those, and you can go and see all the work that we're doing with the film.
Awesome, awesome, man. Well, again, man, it goes without saying that it has been a pleasure having you on the show today, man. Great stuff that you shared. Again, sharing your journey, your transparency. I love that. For those of you again who have not had an opportunity to check it out, please check out When Claude Got Shot. It's available on multiple streaming platforms.
Yeah, it's on Apple and Amazon right now, and it's going to be expanding pretty soon, but it's on Apple and Amazon.
Awesome. It'll definitely be worth your time, and even sharing that as a family with young people to kind of check this
Absolutely.
out and really dive in and have some conversation about that. So, man, again, I appreciate you, my brother. Obviously, this is not the last time we're going to get to chat because we stay connected anyway, and I'm definitely going to have you back on the show at a different time where we can elaborate a little bit more about your projects and things of that nature, so we can send that message out. So we'll definitely do a follow up with you on that, most
Wonderful.
certainly. So again, if for those of you who had an opportunity to listen to our show today, if you've enjoyed it, please subscribe, please share, please comment, please like. We definitely appreciate that. If you wanted to find out more about my book, Blessings in the Streets, as well as any services that I offer, please feel free to visit blessingsinthestreets.com for more information in that regard. So with that said, just remember, here at the Blessings in the Streets podcast, this is the place where your story is your glory, where your relationships are relevant, and where your journey is in your joy. So I am your host again, Joseph B. Roberts. It has been a pleasure. And until next time, God bless. Take care of yourself and just stay tuned because we're going to have more and more interesting and powerful, impacting stories to share with you to show you how to be encouraged and be empowered to overcome the adversities of life. Take care and see you then.